Yay. I think we beat a brownie troop from North Texas. Yeah. A win is a win. Exactly right. Tell that to John Simonson back there, okay? Come on in the house, people. My OCD is kicking in. Sorry about that. All right. As we're gathering, we have a group from from where? Okay. From Georgia. They are still doing hurricane maintenance in our town from Sally and before. Yay them. They have been in Foley and Mobile. John Chickering, is that how you say it? Is their fearless leader here, and I'm going to give him about 5-10 minutes to tell you who they are and what they do. And I won't keep you any longer. Okay? Clock's running. Come on up. Clock's running. Call him down at 10 minutes, Bernie.
See, the mistake he made is he thinks that I need a working microphone in order to talk to the crowd. What's online? Good evening, everybody. Again, I'm John Chickering. I'm leading a team of myself and 4 others. Lisa, David, Daryl, and my wife Margaret are over here. So just thank you so much to them for putting up with me again. They were all on our team when we were in Port St. Joe, January of last year. Thank you to the church and your kitchen angels, the church who has provided a place for us to sleep at night, and the kitchen angels who have been helping to feed us this week. So we really appreciate it. I thought I'd share a little bit of personal testimony this evening, actually, as to why are we here? Why would an otherwise perfectly sane, although I don't have competent medical authority to back that up, but perfectly sane adult decide to spend a week fixing homes for people that they've never met and will probably never see again? Let me give you a little context. There was an ad that ran on the TV channel up in Boston where we were living at the time, about 15 years ago. The scenery was amazing. The music was upbeat. The announcer, she had this incredible voice, and that's why she got her job, I suppose. Get out there, she said. Don't just sit there on your couch rubbing the numbers off of the remote. Get out there and live your life. And it was an advertisement for a cruise line, and they wanted you on their cruise ships. Well, maybe God wants us out there. So, if I go way back, one of my earliest childhood TV memories is of an advertisement. Now, the TV at the time was a box that was about this high. It was black. It had a couple of knobs on the side, and the reason my dad liked it is it had 2 remote controls. One was named Rob, and the other was named John. And it was a color TV. It had 3 colors: black, white, and gray. But in that that ad, that one morning, I remember roughly when I was 10, there's a flyover, and you've seen some of these scenes before, of neighborhood after neighborhood, street after street after street, just blown away down in the foundation. No houses surviving, trees over. You've seen the pictures: Katrina, Michael, Zeta, Sally. Well, this one left an impression on me. And the ad ended, black screen, white letters: Camille was no lady. Well, let's fast forward a bit. For most of the next 4 decades, I didn't really think much about those images, and then came Katrina. And for some reason, Katrina's storm track caught my attention. Over the southern tip of Florida, that was the first landfall. Turned northward, headed towards Nolens, across the Mississippi Delta, back into the water, and then finally into Pearlington. And as I was looking at the track, I said, well, at least the weak side of the storm is headed to Nolens, but I don't know about those people over there in Mississippi. I sure hope not many people live over there. Well, I couldn't tell you why at the time, and I couldn't stop thinking about the people who lived over there. But I'll tell you now, I've learned that God was speaking to me. And as the first few weeks after that storm unfolded, and we saw the extent of the damage and how, both in terms of severity and breadth of the damage, we as United Methodists did respond. We sent teams, we prepared flood buckets, we sent clothing, we sent bedding, and teams went down there as well. So I led a team from our church. We were living outside of Boston at the time, and I've learned not to say Boston anymore. And because I grew up in Maryland, so it was just one of those, never quite picked that part up. But we went down, and we made a trip. August 30th, 2005 was the storm. We showed up July 10th of 2006, and the Methodist Church put us right at ground zero. We're in Pearlington, Mississippi, where Katrina made her last landfall. Abject chaos nearly a year later. I just was never prepared for that. But our trip caught the attention of the local ABC affiliate, Channel 5 in Boston, and they'd sent out a news crew to interview us both before and after that trip. And as I was watching the interview of the pastor, he said something really profound to me. But I want to share with you that when I saw that storm, all I knew is I couldn't not go. I could not just sit there. I had to get out there. What the pastor said was, we were all responding to God's call. I wasn't responding to God's call. I was going because I couldn't not go. Okay? Yeah, is that the time signal? Well, think about Revelations 3:20. Behold, I stand and knock at the door, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in with him and eat with him and he with me. Well, Jesus is knocking, and we need to respond. I needed to respond, and it was a matter of months before I'd learn, or I'd admit to, something really profound. Jesus had been knocking, and in the case of Katrina, really hard. And I'd been wondering what all the noise was about. This was one case where ignorance was not bliss. And what followed was even more riveting. God had been speaking to me, and I had not been paying attention. Like I'm not going to pay attention to the sound to the guy with the clock at the back of the room at the end here. It was as if I'd learned to set up some sort of autoimmune response that would automatically repel all of God's attempts to get through to me. Shields were up, I knew it, and I wasn't going to let myself or others know, and I wasn't going to let Mr. Sulu take them down. In this case, prayer, my conversation with God, was being initiated by God, not me. Wait a minute. I'm a corporate executive. I'm supposed to be in control of the agenda here, right? Well, that possibility was something I hadn't really considered. And of course, I wanted to talk on my terms, where I control the agenda and I set the conversation, and when it's convenient for me. Oh, and there's the drama. There'd been a part of me that wanted my conversations with God to be so dramatically different, like a burning bush or an old donkey, that their holy nature would be obvious to someone as stubborn, socially clueless, or ignorant as me. Then God pointed out something even more profound. Maybe did God use that burning bush to get Moses' attention? What if God had been reaching out to Moses for some matter of months or years like he'd been reaching out to me in the months after the storm? Was that the burning bush really the cold slap in the face to get Moses' attention? Was I going to be that stubborn or ignorant? And as they say during the football games, after further review, I'd like to think that I didn't need such an unmistakably dramatic device to bend my will and to capture my attention. As it turns out, I did. I did need an unmistakable event to knock me about the head and shoulders and grab my attention. Hurricane Katrina was my burning bush. Now, where's Pastor Bill? Pastor Bill, I'm sure you remember a seminary professor who likes the fact that I got the water and the fire there together in the same sentence during, okay, all right, so. And that meant I was not in control at all. As my younger daughter might have said, no, duh, Daddy. But that also means is my need to be in control was getting in the way of serving God. Ouch. Well, Christ teaches us that how we make use of what we're given is vitally important. In remembering the parable of talents where the two servants who took the talents and actually worked with the talents were well rewarded. And the third steward's actions, who followed the path that showed the least possible faith in God, were not. The well-rewarded stewards took what they were given and ran with it and showed faith. God has given us all a unique set of talents. And you can look around and see much of what is in this world that is wrong. And maybe just a few magic wands, we can go fix everything. No more hunger, no more homelessness, no more drug problems, no more health problems, no more loneliness. Well, that would be convenient, but I'm going to offer you a personal perspective. I see magic wands all across this room right now. Right here, right now, we have the wands and we have the magic. And it's not Harry Potter magic, it's God's magic. That power to do things in His service that we would think impossible without her. All those unique sets of talents in us at this very moment. Time and again in the Bible, we see how God calls the improbable to do the impossible. One of my favorite Bible verses is John 15:5. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you abide in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, now it says you can do nothing. But I'm going to offer another way to read it. You can do no thing. God is the magic and we are the wands. And just as the branch draws life from the vine when properly spliced in, we draw God's magic when we draw close to Him and exercise faith by using the talents. And in my case, that means I need to get out there. For if my wand is not used, the talent in me, the magic in me is for naught, and I show no faith. Sharing this message with you this evening reminds me to look inside myself for the magic God has placed in me again, and understand my talents are a part of God's body, and find those gifts and get out there. For the magic happens when we use our wands.
He is the puzzle maker.
How was the timing on that?
Timing was very good on that, by the way. You get a smiley face. Yes, you get a smiley face. Thank you so much. Nice to have them in the house, isn't it, guys? Yeah, they have been eating and showering and working, and you have opened the...
Not necessarily now.
Yeah, we'll leave the light on for you. All right, let's go to 360 Bible Study, John, if you can. Matthew chapter 15. This is what we sometimes call the Canaanite woman. I'm going to say it's the woman who was not going to let go, not going to quit. Now, for what we have done so far, this is week 4. John, the next slide, Bible study that works. I've asked you to think these questions whenever you read a Bible passage. What's happening here? What's being said and what's implied by what's being said? Who are the characters? Who's in this real-life drama? Who's in the play? Next slide. And I purposefully have kept this one a little shorter. I was going to let you out early, but then he showed up. One of the things I want you to always remember is that the Hebrew population were very sensual. The Psalms were written to cultivate what are you hearing, what are you smelling, what are you tasting. Any of you walk through some place and you'll get a smell and it takes you back 100 years? Stephanie used to do that. We'd be in the mall and all of a sudden I'd see her take a deep breath and she would smell whatever smell, not the bad smells, but she would smell baby powder. Someone would pass with a baby and I'd just see her. She said, I remember that. I always remembered the other smells. But there's a particular smell. I know it's a combination of cumin and a couple other spices, but it's my favorite Mexican restaurant in St. Joseph, Missouri. It was Barbosa's Castillo, and Pillin Barbosa owned it, and his first time was in his house. And my brother and I would eat so much. I would order 8 enchiladas when I'm 6, 7, 8 years old. And Pillin didn't speak much English, and he would come out and sit in a chair and watch us eat and just laugh. But then he started picking us up. He was a fireman too. He'd pick us up and he'd take us in the kitchen, and he had erected 2 stools where my brother and I could sit or stand, and we'd watch him cook. I can smell the smells. And every now and then, sometimes it's a Mexican restaurant. When I had the Spanish church, it would happen. And I'll catch that whiff of the cumin, and it just takes me back. And I can see Pillin's face, and I can hear his laugh, and I can smell the restaurant, and I can taste the food. In the Old Testament, a good bit of it was written to cultivate that experience for you. So what I'm wanting you to do when you read your text is take that deep breath, smell the smells. You're going to have fun in the Christmas sermon when we get to the manger, because we're going to smell the smells. Have you ever smelled something so terrible you thought you tasted it? Wait till Christmas. But this is a vital part of the culture of the day. So as we read these texts, I want you to dream, to imagine. Do you remember when you were a kid and you'd think of Christmas and you imagined what you were going to get? You could picture yourself playing with it. John and I would talk about how we'd play together if we got these things. If you got this and I got that. Not that John. My brother's also named John. The next slide, we begin with the scripture from Matthew 15. A Canaanite woman from those territories came and shouted, "Show me mercy, Son of David." Is that the Lord calling me to preach? Yeah, it's all right. My daughter's suffering terribly from a demon possession, and you're laughing. But Jesus didn't respond. You remember what I've said? Beware of tricky Jesus. Okay, very important not to over-spiritualize and just see what's happening. Beware of tricky Jesus. This is what we know here. Canaanite women. We already know about the Samaritans. Nobody wants to be around the Samaritans. Back in your Old Testament, the Canaanite folk, they were just evil. We didn't like them. A long history in Judaism of not liking these people. In fact, there seems to be a long history in Judaism of not liking a lot of people. You get that picture for what we've studied? There was a segment that we really liked, but then there was them. I liken it to Betty, who was in the first student pastorate I served in Kentucky. And we were talking about inviting people to church. And Betty quite lovingly and simply said, "But you know, Bill, everyone I'd want to come to our church already goes somewhere. I don't want to invite the rest of them." The church. So what's Jesus doing here? I'm guessing as I read that last line, and if you're online tonight, I will do my best to stay in camera zone. If I get out, Malachi, give me a wave. Jesus doesn't respond at all. The Jesus I read in the gospel, pretty good at talking, pretty good at answering questions. I don't find too many times where Jesus that I know goes, nothing. So I'm guessing there's more that meets the eye. I'm guessing something else is in play here. There must be something that I don't understand. And if you can go there, you have made a huge step in your spiritual growth. If you can read your Bible and say, I don't understand. Because we humans have a desperate need to know that we know that we know that what we believe is right. So if you can begin by owning, I don't know what's happening, you are showing signs of maturity. To go back in time, you are wise, grasshopper. What show did that come from? Haha, thank you. Yes. Take a deep breath. Picture the scene. Can you play it in your head like a movie? Have you got too old to do that? Can you replay the scene in your mind? Feel it, taste it, smell it? There's something here. And the next slide as we go there in the text, his disciples came and urged him. Send her away. She keeps after us. What it says literally is she keeps hollering at us. She's bothering us. Anybody remember the back seat of your car when you're kids? He's touching me. He looked at me. You remember that? Yes. How many times in our studies, when we play it out in a 360 way, where we walk around it and we look at it from every angle, how many times have these disciples acted like toddlers? James touched me. Now Jesus, this is the other thing. He says, to who we don't know, I've been sent to the lost sheep of Israel, not to you guys. So who's Jesus talking to? We got two stories playing at once, don't we? We have a begging pagan woman. You got that? We have the disciples, the closest, the bravest, the most faithful. It sounds like Jesus is answering two questions at once without answering any question. I don't know if you've noticed, Paul has, that sometimes I'll get to a point and I don't answer the question. We leave it hanging for you to soak in, to swim around in your head, to walk around it from all of the different angles and look at it. It may not change what you believe, but it will create an understanding of the text and who might think of it differently than you do. So who's Jesus talking to? We assume he's talking to the woman. But look out for a plot twist. Don't be afraid to be wrong when you study your Bible. Lost children of the Israelites. We're about to find this plot twist. Do you think the disciples have any idea that they could be the lost children of Israel? I don't think they do. Who were the lost people of Israel? It was the Pharisees, the scribes, the Sadducees, the disciples, the followers, the Jewish people. And so if I come into town and I say I'm coming to the lost sheep and I show up to pastor your church, who are the lost sheep? Whoo! You are wise, grasshopper. Something else is at play here. Something else is taking place. I would like to say the plot thickens. If we were ending and continuing this week, it'd be a good time to say, stay tuned to the same bat channel at the same bat time. Go to the next slide. But she knelt before him and said, Lord, help me. And he says, it's not good to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Here's the plot twist, everyone. Here's tricky Jesus showing up on the scene. This is the place where you can't make it too spiritual. Don't make it into something it's not. We start to ask, who's he talking to? Remember, the disciples are watching, right? They've already said to send her away. They've already decided what needs to be done. Here's another thing. Have you noticed how many times in your New Testament the disciples tell Jesus what to do? Yeah. No God. That's not how we do it here. Careful. So why does Jesus say this? The plot just shifted from the woman to the disciples. The woman has shown her submission. The woman has shown her faith. The woman has knelt. To kneel in this culture was presenting oneself for whatever happened. You are in a vulnerable, submissive position. When men knelt, they are saying, I give you the right because in this position I can do nothing to stop you. Okay? Yes, the plot is twisting. The dogs. The word here is not really dogs. It's little lovely house pets. If we were to really translate it, we'd call it the little lovely pets. I love my dog. Anybody, you ever get in a crowd and show them your dog pictures? Anybody ever show your dog picture before you show your grandkids' pictures? Uh-huh. Yeah. How many of you like to have your dog sleep with you but always told the kids they couldn't? Uh-huh. We're getting there. In this setting, Jesus has now taken a total shift. And what you have to remember is this is a first century context. You don't understand it, and you're trying to read the Bible, and you're trying to grow because you live in 21st century Southern America. Okay? You guys know what church is. But now you're trying to learn and grow from a first century document. When Jesus says little dogs, he is saying to the disciples, these are the people you're supposed to be loving. In the Old Testament, there were rules about not picking every bit of the crops so that the poor could have it. There were rules about taking care of the passerbys. You want an interesting study to pair with your political views. Study the care of the widows, the orphans, and the aliens in your Old and New Testament. Read those passages and compare it with 21st century America. Maybe we'll do that someday. That's not a part of all this. The kids give the dog their broccoli. Yeah, healthy dogs. How many of you remember, you look over at your kid's plate, hey, there's no Brussels sprouts. Where'd they go? And Duffy's under the table going, I like that. They are our friends when they're in the right place. Now, it's interesting the place our dogs get in our lives, because they will get up in that bed. My son has a Bernedoodle that's not allowed to sleep with the kids. And they're light sleepers, and sometimes he said the kids end up in their bed. And when the daughter, Annie, who's 6, gets in their bed, the Bernedoodle, which is the size of a horse, he says he'll watch him. One paw, the other paw, the fourth paw. There they go, crawling, worming, until he gets his head on the pillow with the granddaughter. Takes half the night, he says. So Jesus is saying to somebody here, it's not good to give the food to the dogs. The disciples are hearing, wait a minute, he's comparing to her to our pets, to people who live in our house with us, to people we care for, tend to, and love genuinely. Interesting. Next slide for us. She says, yes, Lord. But even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. There's a powerful piece here. I hope you're understanding. If you guys are grasping the methods that we're working through these studies with, you've already begun asking your questions. What's happening? Who's involved? Why is Jesus saying these things? The woman knows her place. She entered the scene of the play. Needy. We don't know what she's like publicly. We don't know if she's rich or if she's poor, if she's loved or if she's despised. We know she has a daughter that's not well. She approaches Jesus and she bows. She is in a state of humble desperation. This is the last-ditch effort. She is unwelcome. The disciples outwardly said, we don't want her here. She is outside the bounds of goodness to these disciples. And she has made her way. She has come her way. She has wormed through the crowd. And she has got right up next to Anne and got in the dirt and knelt and said, please, Anne, my daughter's dying. The disciples say what? Let's get her out of here. She's bothering us. She's interfering with our learning to be disciples. She's interfering with our ministry. She's interfering with what you're teaching us. End of the rope, end of the road. This is her last chance. Woman, you have great faith. It'll be just as you wish. And then right then, her daughter is healed. Jesus, she has great faith. Who does she have faith in? Does she have faith in God? Does she have faith in Jesus? Is she believing that Jesus, if not is Messiah, could be Messiah? She's believing that there's something in Jesus that has a spiritual, supernatural power to heal her daughter. Are you getting that? The disciples have seen Jesus heal, and they're still not quite getting it. But in each of these stories that we talk about, there have been people who live on the outside who somehow believe Jesus can handle, can fix, can help, or does, or would, or might. So I ask, is this woman a believer? Everything in the text would say she's not. Could that be what Jesus is saying? Has tricky Jesus shown up again? And is he saying you have great faith? Is he also giving the what's the side eye? Your wife ever give you the side eye? Bernie, would you behave? More than once? Yeah, you can probably sense it without even seeing it, can't you? It's because you don't behave. Is Jesus also giving the side eye to the disciples when he says, here he is, you have real faith, woman, daughter, child. But who's he really looking at? She is not a believer in our terms. I don't know what to do with that. Any of you know what to do with that? I've had a couple good friends over the years who didn't go to church. By all practical purposes, they were what we would call unsaved, unbelievers. Yet they were nicer than some of my church people. I had some church people right up front say, we don't invite you to watch ball games with us because we don't want you to see how we act and how much we drink. I said, I don't really care. They said, okay, but we still don't want you to see it. So my unchurched friends invited me over, and they did drink, but I never saw any of them drunk. I did one. I told you the stories of Mitchell, didn't I? Yeah, we got time. I haven't told you the story of Mitchell. I show up at Muck's house, and nobody really knows who I am yet. My friend Muck was a police officer, and we had met through a series of crises. And he said, why don't you come over and watch a ball game? He knew Steph was out of town. So I show up, and over in front of the TV is a guy who's had a few too many, and he's pacing in front of the TV at the Alabama game. And he's angry, and he's yelling, and he's frustrated. Everybody knows Alabama's going to win in the end, except once in a while, right? So everybody in the crowd's like, Mitchell, stop it. So anyway, he turns around, and there's a stranger, and he goes, who the whatever, he said, are you? And Muck said, that's my pastor. Now, this is my unchurched guy, right? And I've just been introduced as his pastor. Mitchell starts shaking. He's having a panic attack. He does, literally. He starts shaking, and he walks up to me, and he just walks up, Bernie. He puts his head on my shoulder, and he starts crying. And he says, Father, I have sinned. I said, Mitchell, I just came to watch a ball game. I'm not on the clock. He said, but Father, I have sinned. So finally, to get him to stop, I picked my hand up, I put him on my hand on his head, and I said, bless you, my son. Next day, I go back to Muck's house. We're going to work on our cars, and I pull in, and there's Mitchell working on his car, and I turn around, and he stands up, and he gets straight, and he goes, Father, I've been drinking. I said, Mitchell, I'm just here to work on cars. He said, but I've been drinking. I said, well, at least you're not driving. He goes, I'm driving too. What does this mean for us? Woman, you have great faith. It'll be just as you wish. How does that jive with ye must be born again? You have to accept Jesus, our traditional take on you are the way, the truth, and the life. You see, I happen to think it doesn't mean that Jesus is the only way. I think it means you live like me, you'll have eternal life. I don't think it's a prayer you pray and then whoop, you're good to go. Otherwise, these pagans, with minimal reference, they are drawn to grace. They respond to grace. They are receiving grace in the conversation. And in this conversation, somewhere between kneeling, Lord have mercy, my daughter is in trouble, you can help, get her out of here, Jesus, this conversation flows. Well, I'm not here for you, woman. all of a sudden I don't think that's for her anymore. She knows her place and she stays down and she responds back. Even the dogs get to eat the crumbs. She's owning her sin. We say, well, you must pray, Lord, I am a sinner. She's living that. And Jesus says, you've got great faith. Anybody have any trouble processing that in your noggin? Go to the next slide for me. I put this up last week. I used a different face, though. But Jesus, that's not how I believe. About 150 years after Jesus, the church kind of began to start deciding that Jesus didn't really know what he talked about. And in the early days of this first church, the Holy Communion is a good example. It was a meal. They called it the love feast. And it was like when you have church suppers and then you would preach. The well's kind of like that in worship because we do have coffee and water and you can have some of that. I had a church once where we had snacks and foods and we had what we called halftime. It was a greeting time, but the people eventually called it halftime because most of them hadn't been in church before. And so the break was naturally halftime. The band didn't come into play or anything, but they would all go refill their snacks and come back and eat. And when we would do communion, at some point we would just simply say, I remember, and there was bread and there was wine. Sarah Bressy's great quote is, we are to invite the world into this place and said, come in, relax, take a deep breath, have bread, have wine. And it was a feast. The scolding in Corinthians is not because they're unworthy in this stuff, it's because they're pigging out. They're eating before other people get their food. You ever getting through the line in church suppers and somebody got the last of the best macaroni and cheese? That's what's happening in Corinth. They're eating so much, and on the communion wine they're drinking so much they're getting drunk. And Paul says, stop it. Make this right before you come to the table. About 150 years later, the church decided that that's not how Jesus really wanted it to be done, and we went to what we know today as modern communion. Interesting, isn't it? We left our homes, we went into cathedrals. Yeah. Questions or thoughts on this passage? Stumps me a lot when I read it. What is a believer? According to this, it's someone who really believes. Somebody say something?
Somebody that's drawn to Jesus.
There you go. Somebody who, for whatever reasons, finds their way and if we had the time, what life events have made you kneel? What life events have brought you to the end of your rope where there's nothing left? What life events have happened that said, I don't want to be here anymore if this is what life is like? If you know some of my story, I've been in that spot. I can name 4 people that kept me alive in this window of my life, who stuck with me so that nothing happened to me. When you come to the place where there's nothing left but the hope that God might. We talk so much about assurance of salvation, but what we see repeatedly in the miracles is, I hope that he might. And that takes such a great depth. I was with a colleague once, and he had a little boy, and he said, hey son, do a backflip off that chair. Kid turned around and spun and took off, and we caught him just at the right time. Faith. Dad will be there. It's that thing. And some of us are fortunate and unfortunate to never come to the end of our rope in our lives. Did you hear what I said? Fortunate and unfortunate. And what I always say is, if you haven't come to the end of your rope, strap in. Buckle up your seatbelt, because it's coming. You're going to lose a spouse. You're going to lose someone dear to you. Your house will burn. There will be an accident. There will be a report from the doctor. It's coming. And somehow we want to retain the kind of faith to where we kneel, I hope that he might. And that seems to be a birthing place for miracles. What were the disciples expected to learn here? Anybody? Thoughts?
Faith over practice.
Faith over practice. I like to say, get over yourselves. Yeah, I like to say, get over yourselves. Jesus is saying, goodness, guys, because this is a repeated thing. You remember the feeding of the 5,000? Send them home. They're hungry, we're tired. Jesus will go off and be by himself, they follow along. What are you doing here? Any of you lay down, take a nap, and one of your kids come in the room? Yeah. Philip would never awaken me, but he would just get real close and go. And you know what my dog does at night when she needs to go out? That nose will be right there. She'll never say a word, never touch me, never bark, just, and all of a sudden I wake up and there's a face. It's like, ah! There'll be some of this in their Sunday. Last slide, John, is just simply free your mind. Again, Sarah Bessie says, one of the goals of life is to unlearn what we've learned so we can learn what God wants us to learn. Did you get that? Repeat it back to me. Hey, look, man, there's a show-off in the house. It's that guy from Georgia. Now, somebody else has a Georgia shirt on in here. Who is that? There he is. You know, I've got that Missouri pillow in my office, and when there's another lady who brings in a Georgia cup, and I can't say her name right off the top of my head, but I make her touch the Missouri pillow when she comes in the office. Disciples are going to repeatedly have this attitude all the way to the moments before the garden. Jesus is going to be arrested, he's going to be taken, and Peter's going to act like a pig. How do we quit acting like church people and become as humble as unchurched people? Amen. Stephanie, Georgia people, we're a blended family. Our youngest was 5 when we met and married. So Steph came from this world that's not in clergydom. And she noticed right off the bat, not long after we married, we went to 2 weddings together. One was a church wedding. And the people kept, we need toilet paper, we need a plunger, we'll go get this, turn the lights, do that, do this. Then I did an unchurched wedding, and they were just so happy I was there. She said, they treat you so much better. She said, why can't we act more like that at church? Because we're disciples. We have it all figured out. And we use that phrase every now and then about our own sin. Well, God's just going to have to understand. And it's birthed out of our own discipleship arrogance that we have arrived. Worship on Sunday. Voila, I'm here, everyone. Now that's just Jerry. That's just Jerry. Yeah, she's the only one that does that. I tell you, we're no different. When I was a puppet annual conference, we'd sit there going, no competition, no competition. He could be better than me. No competition. It's natural order, isn't it? We spend our life unlearning what we've learned so that we can learn what really is. And if you will digest this method of 360 Bible study, you can put it to any issue that you face, economically, politically, whatever the thing is. You can put it on the table, walk around it, meet the other characters, learn what they feel and what they sense. And you may never change what you believe, but you will understand what they believe. And when you can understand, see, the disciples hadn't yet discovered that they had to understand the people Jesus spent time with. They still thought, he's spending time with me. They had yet to discover he's spending time with who he wants us to spend time with. Leading by doing. Stephanie's mother never let her cook, but Steph sat on a chair and watched and learn to cook. Our kids all grew up cooking. They call every now and then for a new recipe. My son Philip is intense. And when he begins a conversation with Dad, can we talk? That means it's serious. He calls me from Auburn. He says, Dad, can we talk? I said, sure, son, what is it? He says, what do you do when you just feel like you cook the 7 same suppers every day? He cooks, his wife doesn't. She does too, but he loves it. It's his stress relief. I said, well, there's food.com, there's the Food Network, there's this, there's that. You can go there. Oh, thanks, Dad. These world they were drawn to Jesus, their simple question was, Jesus, help me. Can I just be close to you? The disciples were developing an attitude that we were picked. And you see, they were outsiders as well. Tax collectors, fishermen were unclean. So they had begun in an outside motion and suddenly moved themselves inside. That Jesus was there to teach them. And yet Jesus kept saying, pay attention, boys. Pay attention, boys. Pay attention. It would be sometime after Jesus died that they would begin to go, oh, there it is. Good news, there's grace. We spend a lifetime getting to know Jesus. The only place it ever stops is when you decide you've learned it all or you've learned enough. Whenever you can wake up and go, I could be wrong about that, you are ripe to learn and to grow. You may not be wrong, but you may also need to grow to relate to others who may be just as wrong or righter than you. Thoughts or opinions? Look at this, quarter till. Just for you, Bernie. Okay, there you go. Everybody else can leave. Bernie and I are staying.
He told me to say that.
John, what you want to say?
I really appreciated that point that non-believers are drawn to grace.
Not Bible thumping.
Who do we draw to us? And what does that mean about the grace we show others? We're not drawing non-believers to us. Are we showing grace to the people that aren't like us?
Right.
Or do we save our grace for the people that think like us, act like us, and believe like us?
Yeah. I suffer with depression and anxiety. I've had some dark days, but I have radar. I can spot it a mile away. Stephanie came out of an abusive relationship, and we'll walk through a store and she'll be checking out, and all of a sudden I'll watch her reach over and touch the hand of the cashier and say, it's going to be okay, honey. She can spot it a mile away. When we look with grace eyes, we see our pain in others. That's why Richard Rohr says if we don't transform our pain into a gift, we transmit it to others. But I'm betting you have some life moment that creates radar in you to where you look out and you go, there I am. I'm right there in Bob. I see it. It is the connectors. And the world is drawn by grace. There's a fascinating book a while back by a guy who had done a lot of unchurched studies. I think the title of the book, it's not Jesus we don't like, it's you. But you think about it. You know, what I've always found interesting, if I preach a sermon on racism or sexism historically in my career, I'm viewed as a liberal. But the same conservatives, if I preach too much on getting drunk, I'm too conservative. So you say, are you liberal conservative? I go, yeah. Every day. So what do you do with that? We must stay in touch with our pain. We must stay in touch with the parts of us that have been broken. We must stay humble somehow. We must not lose some of the parts of us that weren't like Jesus, so that we can remember them when we meet other people. We must not forget our mistakes, so that they become the light that shines through us. Anyone else? Little girl asked her mama one time why the guy was so mad preaching, because he was yelling all the time. Yeah. And I've told you the stories about the lady in my church who said, I always feel better. I always feel worse. How'd she say it? I always feel more spiritual when I feel worse about myself. What have we done to people? What have we done? Evangelism today should be like shooting fish in a barrel, because everyone out there is broken. When you've heard my Checky the Rabbit story, my brother had a G.I. Joe that had lost an arm. And he loved to play with that G.I. Joe, because he was the guy that got wounded. He was the hero that got hurt saving people. You know, he was the guy who you had to adjust his uniform for the arm sleeve and all of that. When you were a kid, you had a favorite toy, and the more raggedy it got, the love for it never changed. Right? Girls in particular with baby dolls, boys with stuffed animals, until you got your first football cleats, and then you just hid it and didn't let people see you sleep with it anymore. But you still did. How do I know that? It's getting over ourselves. Men, this is particularly hard for you, because we have the things we don't do. Some of us only eat steak, potatoes, burgers, and chicken. Or sausage and sauerkraut. I always got to, and I was this guy. Again, Steph, like me, suffers with anxiety and depression. So the girls would want to go to midnight shopping, you know, Black Friday. And one of them came in one day and said, Dad, would you take me? I'm like, Then I saw those eyes. And I went. And my 16-year-old came in and said, Bill, it was my stepdaughter. She called me her Bill. She said, my Bill, I need a pair of jeans. And I'm going, oh, crap. Mom's busy. Would you go with me? Yes, of course I will, honey. I'm standing in the dressing room outside. There's like 6 walls. There's mamas with these clothes, and then there's Bill, and I had 17 pair of jeans across my arm. And Kelly's inside going, hand me the 2. Hand me the 4. Hand me this brand and a 0. And yes, there's a 0. There is nobody on the planet who can wear them, but they make them. And I'm getting the evil eye from all these women. What are you doing back here? I said, I'm holding the jeans, just holding the jeans, just holding the jeans. Looking straight ahead, looking straight ahead. But afterwards, Kelly came out, and we went to buy the jeans, and her face was lit up like a Christmas tree. And I thought, I'm a shopper. We got to get over ourselves. I think that's step 1 as a church. Grace draws people. The lesson Jesus is trying to teach the disciples: watch how I talk, watch how I act, watch how I love, watch what I do. That quote I gave you last week, Jesus sure gets in the way of what I believe. Don't ever let that happen to you. Anything you want to say before we go? Time to shut down. Bernie.
You know, I'm sort of a firm believer that when it's one thing to get people into the church, it's another thing to take care of them while they're in church.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you want to get people in church just to make your audience bigger, you fail. Mm-hmm. But if you bring them in and you love them and show them really is good about it. You know, if you know Jesus, maybe go to the altar with it. I don't know, something.
Huh? Jesus saw the intrinsic value in every soul he spoke to. Rich, poor, large, small, pagan believers, he saw them all as having equal value. I like that. I need that.
And I'm wanting to believe, too, that God pulls people in, too.
Mm-hmm.
And not just,
That's what we call the Provinia grace.
right.
What we have to do is stay out of that way. Because God was wooing this female to Jesus, and the disciples are going, get her back. Remember, they did that with the kids, too. The kids are running to Jesus. It was like when my grandkids were smaller, and I'd walk in the house, and they would knock me over. And then came the big dog. But that's my image of Jesus and the children is them just running and piling on him because he was that persona. And then what do the disciples do? Get away from him. He's holy. Yeah. We can get that way with our space too. We don't drink coffee, we don't run, we don't talk loud in the sanctuary, we come in and be quiet. I always go back to Jewish temple. They danced and sang their way into the church. How much happier would worship be if you guys came in dancing and singing on Sunday morning? Shouting. When I was a kid, 4 minutes, when I was a kid, we still had shouting Methodist. They were in their 90s when I knew them when I were 18, but Mrs. Garrison was one. And as she would get blessed, she would take her handkerchief out and she would twirl it. And she would go, woo! And then she'd stand up and she'd start walking with the hymn. She'd be going, woo, woo, back and forth. And you always knew it was coming because she'd start out by tapping that hymnal. And then she'd start moving. And yes, she had the moves. And when she brought out the hanky and she put the hips in action as she was walking, you knew you were preaching a good sermon that day. That's just who the old-timers were in the Methodist Church. That's who we were. So the space is holy, but what makes it holy is the heart of people, not how quiet you are. You know, the only thing worse than kids in church is a church that's never had any kids in church. You ought to have crayon marks on your walls. Well, they need to learn. You guys didn't learn. I watch you guys sleep when I preach and look around and check your phones and read your books. Yeah? I see that. Y'all didn't learn? And how many of you told your kids you don't always get your way? Mm-hmm. Well, preacher, I don't like that. I want to go. What'd you say to your kids? And I know you've heard me say this in closing now. Remember when you get your switch out for the kids for misbehaving in church? What if I came out with a switch one Sunday to Mr. So-and-so who just dozed off? Pow! He'd be getting out there. I'd be getting out there too come June.
You know, one time the preacher was preaching, the guy fell asleep. The preacher says, wake him up. He said, you wake him up. You put him to sleep.
There you go. May God bless you with the eyes to see those who are seeking, uncertain, wandering and wondering. May you see the faith that they have to do this. And may it be life-changing for each of us. Amen? Amen. Amen.